Train the Trainer. Welcome to the Train the Trainer workshop. Whether you are preparing to be a professional trainer, or you are someone who does a bit of training as part of your job, you'll want to be prepared for the training that you do. This workshop offers various types of training tools to help create and deliver engaging, compelling workshops that will encourage trainees to come back for more. Research demonstrates that when clear goals are associated with learning, it occurs more easily and rapidly. With that in mind, let's review our goals for today. By the end of this workshop, participants will be able to define training, facilitating, and presenting. Understand how to identify participants' training needs. Create a lesson plan that incorporates the range of learning preferences. Create an active, engaging learning environment. Develop visual aids and supporting materials. Manage difficult participants and tough topics.
Knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe.
Depending on the need of your participants, you may be called upon to provide training or facilitate a discussion of ideas. This module will help to determine which approach you need in a particular situation. Your role as the trainer is to encourage behavioral change in the participants. Training is not an event where we attend a workshop one day and expect the desired behavior to take place the next day. Training is a process. It begins before participants sign up for a class and continues until the new knowledge, skills, and attitudes are applied regularly. Training includes identifying the need for learning to take place, securing management buy-in for training to be developed, creating participant-centered learning opportunities, and evaluating the effectiveness of the training offered. The purpose of training is to deliver results. We make training available when we want to improve performance in some way, because we believe that it will help to move our organization from where we are right now to where we want to be. Presenting is something that can take place in training or a meeting, and your presentation skills come with you. If you are one of those people that get complimented because you have great speaking skills, good pacing, and quality materials, then you already have great presentation habits. On the other hand, if you are someone that tends to mumble if you are tired, or you don't inject inflection into your voice, then you can develop those skills. Sometimes trainers rely on their presentation skills to get a point across, but not all training is presenting. A lot of training is delivered in other ways, such as demonstration, case studies, exploration activities, games, and guided practice. When do we need training? Lack of performance does not always mean that there is training needed. There are several areas to consider before even looking at training as a consideration. Determine the type of need. Is there a gap between high and low performers? If so, what is one group doing that the other isn't? Is there a real opportunity for improvement? We like to think, especially as trainers, that there is always something to learn and room for growth. In looking at the gap you have just identified, is there room for that growth to take place? When you have new products, equipment, or regulations, the indication for training may be very clear. Try to provide training early so that there is no slowdown in performance as the changes take place. Who needs the training? Identify the level of the organization that is being impacted by the need you identified in step 1. Problems or deficiencies can exist specific to an individual or to a job. Future planning may mean that an entire shift of people or an organization need training, which would be the case if you are opening a new plant. Make sure that you need training. If the gap really exists because of performance issues, attitudes, or capacity for learning, then training is not what you need. Despite what we may like to think, we cannot train all people to do all things. Do the systems support you? We can train people for all kinds of things, but if the systems in place don't support your training, performance will not improve. If Jean finishes her work every day by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you continually scan the office to see who is behind and give extra work to Jean, she just might eventually learn to make her work extend until 5 o'clock anyway, so that you stop giving her that extra work. Does Jean need training to improve her performance? Of course not. Jean was being punished for performing well since there was no incentive for getting more work done than everyone else. In addition to that, the other staff was being rewarded for their slower performance since Jean was picking up the slack. While her colleagues might benefit from training that helps them be more efficient, the other aspect to consider is that Jean needs an incentive to do more than the minimum daily expectations. Would coaching suffice where training is considered? Sometimes people don't actually need a full training program. A supervisor with skill in identifying gaps and providing coaching could potentially provide the support that is needed in 10-minute sessions of focus coaching. Sometimes our employees just need their concerns addressed, questions answered, or a skill demonstrated. Sometimes we tell supervisors that they are now coaches, but they may not know how to coach. They may not understand what a powerful tool coaching is, and so it's up to you to help them. Could your coaches/supervisors use some training? On-the-job coaching and training can be a very good return on your investment, rather than long training sessions. Coaching can provide that just-in-time support that provides the employee with the information that they really need to move ahead. Whereas a trainer can have knowledge that participants do not have, a facilitator may not have the same knowledge or expertise in the particular subject matter that the participants do. The role of the facilitator is to provide an experience in sharing, discussion, learning, and openness for participants. Although we may use the terms trainer and facilitator interchangeably at times, there are tangible differences. Can you think of some possible differences? A facilitator uses their knowledge of group processes and dynamics when planning their meeting. They might make use of their skills to run a meeting or a workshop where participants are considering problems, addressing pressing business needs, or planning for the future. Just like in skills training, a facilitator needs to have an agenda, specific objectives, and a plan for how the meeting will go. Facilitating requires the following basic skills. Make sure everyone participates. Make sure everyone understands and focuses on the problems being addressed. Protect participants from any kind of backlash or abuse by creating and maintaining a safe environment. Provide regular check-ins and follow-up within the session. When people get involved in a facilitated group, they need to know whether they are still on track and that they are making progress. In addition, they need frequent interaction with the facilitator to inject energy, keep them on track, and also to allow some of what they do to sink in. One way to bring it all together is to check in with the group and record their progress on a large flip chart or whiteboard at the front of the room. This will facilitate guided discussion, mind mapping, and exploration. Keeping the group focused and together in this way also helps to foster the cohesiveness of the group. Now let's look at a practical illustration. Jordan watched as his team members milled about with no idea where to begin. Nick and Annie looked like lost souls with no direction. Jordan knew the time had come to corral the troops and make some sense of all that their jobs entailed. With a wave of his magic wand and keen eye for proper training, Jordan waxed poetic and explained all that they were expected to do in finite detail, leaving no stone unturned. Soon, everyone had a clear grasp of the concepts and had a plan of action to succeed. Jordan made no bones about it. They would forge ahead as one or disintegrate as many. Everyone understood that the job had to be done and now knew exactly how to make things happen. The former clueless bunch were now top-notch movers and shakers, and the company leaders were elated with how quickly they caught on and how swiftly Jordan whipped them into tip-top shape.
Learning is not a spectator sport. D. Blocher.
A major aspect of your training is recognizing what your participants need, want, and expect, and then responding accordingly. This module will explore some ways to identify participants' needs and how to adjust your material accordingly. A good needs analysis has 3 basic steps. Understand who your participants are. Your training is designed specifically to meet the needs of every person in the workshop, right? The answer is yes, of course it is, but there are others who require consideration before you deliver your course. These people include the supervisor or manager who has identified a need for training, Find out what their expectations are for the training, and be sure to incorporate those items into your session. Who is paying for the training? This might be the trainee, the supervisor, or a manager in a different department altogether. What are their expectations of training, and what outcomes will they insist on? If you can meet the needs of your participants, all three of them, you are much more likely to achieve success in your training and to be asked to return for more training. You'll also have to determine whether all of the concerns outlined by the participants, supervisors, and payers are real needs. This should come to light in your needs assessment. Conducting a needs assessment is the best way to determine what your training needs to include. For example, a manager may say to you that staff in the contact center are consistently talking too long on the phone and yet not making enough sales. They need training on closing and time management. When you speak to the customer service representatives, they may tell you that they keep their calls as short as possible. However, they cannot seem to shorten the call and still make a sale. They also feel that they need training in closing and time management. Since both groups have identified the same problem in their interviews, you may think that you need to provide training in closing the sale and time management. However, if you also spend a day observing the high-performing and low-performing CSRs, you may find that they both spend their time in exactly the same way, but the difference is just in the closing. As a result, you determine that training is needed on closing sales, not time management. Since the CSRs and their supervisors perceive that time management is also an issue, you will want to devote some energy to that topic, but your main focus is going to be on closing sales. Learn what they know. There is a saying, never underestimate the intelligence of your listeners, and never overestimate their need for information. We might take for granted that most people involved in sales understand that trust is the basis of a sales relationship, but they may not actually understand the range of ways that trust can be built or damaged. You should also identify the level of knowledge that your participants have on a scale from awareness to mastery. Learn their motivation. Are your participants interested in the training that you offer? Anyone who is motivated in what they know about the training before it is delivered can help to motivate their colleagues. People who lack interest, however, will be a little more difficult to engage. Are your participants prisoners, vacationers, socializers, learners? Once you have your needs analysis complete and know what kind of training you need to design, you can begin to gather materials that will help you reach your objectives. Your materials are a very important component of training. Make sure that the materials you will rely on are current and applicable. There is no point in gathering material about sales techniques, for example, when the techniques listed in your resources have been well proven to be ineffective and are no longer used. In addition, be careful with information that you glean from the internet. While we can find virtually anything on the World Wide Web, sometimes what you are finding is information, but what you actually want is knowledge. Copyright laws vary around the world, but they are uniformly strict. If you are using materials that someone else has written, whether they are published or not, or you plan to include copies of articles or other information, make sure that you have written permission from the copyright holder and that you note their permission properly within your materials. Now that you know what your training objectives are and you have your materials gathered, take some time to formally evaluate where the gaps are in learning so that you can design a tailored training plan. Ask yourself questions that pertain to the following domains. Cognitive domain. As a result of this training, what is important that people know? What do participants need to know that they did not know before? Affective domain. How do I want participants to feel about what they learn? Am I trying to create a positive attitude toward a change process, excitement about a new idea, or self-confidence in their ability to perform? How do I want them to relate to people in ways that they have not before? Psychomotor domain. What do participants need to do that is different from what they did before? Interpersonal domain. Are there behaviors that need to or will change as a result of the training? To answer the questions, you will have to gather more information than you actually need. Thoroughly research your topic, analyze the material, and then break it down into the essentials that you will use. Having too much information will mean that you do not run out of content during training, and that you have the resources available so that you can answer questions that people ask. Remember, sometimes our audience knows more than we expected, and material becomes redundant very quickly. Here are a few research tips that will help you to determine trends that may be impacting the industry or organization, and will help you to locate your reference material. What trade or industry articles have been published in the last 12 to 24 months? What articles have appeared in business or popular publications in the last 12 months? What topics are being blogged about repeatedly in the last 12 months? Be careful about using the information, as we mentioned previously. Blogs can tell you what the hot button issues are, and provide you with information, but they could be thin on research or knowledge. What books have been published on the subject in the last year? Which topics appear over and over again on conference programs for this industry? Now let's look at a practical illustration. Cameron surveyed the room and couldn't make heads or tails of what he'd seen. Jane held rulers, pencils, and a dry erase board in her hand. Michael held crayons, a telephone, and a box of tissue in his hands. Cameron sensed they lacked proper preparation and knew he had to turn things around quickly. With the items readily set aside, Cameron doled out orders to get them what they needed, and soon everyone in the room had been outfitted with the proper tools. Cameron understood from the moment he laid eyes on them that without the proper gear, they had no chance of success. Jane and Michael sat straighter in their chairs. They'd never realized that they were ill-equipped. New tools, a new drive, and new determination led them down a road they'd never ventured and one they'd never forget.
You cannot teach a man anything. You can help him discover it within himself. Galileo Galilei.
A lesson plan is an outline that can keep you on track and give you plenty of options. While the lesson plan is a guide for how you will manage a particular workshop, a well-designed lesson plan will also allow you to enhance your training. A lesson plan may remind you of being in school and having a teacher flip open a plan book. That really is what you are doing here. A good lesson plan won't just keep your training on track, it helps you to ensure that you have included all of the required elements in your training. In addition, a good plan has a few extra elements to it that will help keep you on track. The introduction. Sometimes a trainer is so focused on delivering the training that they forget that they also have to introduce themselves. Your introduction at the beginning of the session, whether you do it yourself or someone else introduces you, helps to establish your credibility as a trainer. Are you a subject matter expert, someone who has been where the participants are, and have a good understanding of their needs? Is there something compelling about you to the participants that they need to know? Wrap UPS. If you can start your training by considering your wrap-up, you will bring some enhancements that other trainers don't. For example, you'll want to end your training with a strong call to action so that participants make the intended changes to their behavior. Sometimes that means providing them with that call to action in an empty form at the beginning of training so that they can build it throughout the day. Other times, it means creating it as a part of the summary or evaluation. Whatever way you decide to wrap up the day can be an essential element of your training plan. Activities. Activities are designed as places and times where learning takes place. They are also a way to engage those different types of learners on levels they relate to, and allow for the self-directed learning that you are designing to take place. Don't just throw in an activity because you think it's time. Plan things that are meaningful to your training. We'll cover different types of activities later on in this course. Breaks. Planning breaks and meal times is as important as the training itself. Starting and ending training on time, including the times that you design for breaks, shows your participants that you value them. When it comes to breaks, you can also plan them strategically when you have exercises taking place. Designing exercises that will be finished as a break starts means that people who finish up early can leave the room and not distract the participants who want a few extra moments. Lunches. Lunches are an interesting part of your training plan. If you can afford to have lunch provided with the training, it's a nice way to keep the group together and have them grow a little closer over mealtime conversation. If participants must bring their own lunch, encourage them to share the time together, again for some connecting or networking. There are several different ways that you can build some flexible time into your training. Having participants help to design the training, perhaps by selecting which objectives you will cover in the training, is one great way to do this. Secondly, keep in mind that training is all about your participants. As trainers, sometimes we are so excited about the potential for growth that we cram way too much into the lesson design. Keep your materials content rich so that you have excellent training, but don't feel that you have to incorporate everything that you know just because you can. Meet your objectives, be participant-centered, and design your lessons well. The best way to build in some flexible time is to deliberately create a couple of spaces in your day that are light so that if you do need to incorporate something extra, or people get engaged in a particular learning opportunity, you won't have to race to get through the rest of your material. This means that you have a couple of topics that are optional that will add to the training if you can include them, but can be left out if needed. A backup plan is an important contingency in your training plan so that you can avoid disasters or at least minimize their effects and maintain your professional decorum. We've probably all heard about speakers who put on their lapel microphone and then forget to turn them off while going to the washroom. One trainer we know was ready to provide a 90-minute breakout session at a conference. She had checked the room out ahead of time, tested her laptop and slides to make sure they worked, and checked that the lighting was okay. She even spoke with the audio-visual technician and tested out the microphone. Everything seemed fine until the session started and she spoke. Someone from the next room, which had been empty when she did her testing, stuck their head in the door and explained that she could be heard in all the rooms on that side of the hall. She had to take off the microphone and project her voice in order to be heard by 200 people. Here is another example. A car with 4 participants starts out on a 2-hour journey to attend training, and a tire blows out. By the time the tow truck arrives and the tire is fixed, that car load of trainees is now 2 hours late for your session, which started on time. Is your program flexible enough to allow you to have groups working simultaneously yet be in different places in the program? Can you help those 4 trainees get caught up at lunchtime? How will you handle these kinds of unforeseen adventures that can test your mettle as a trainer? Now let's look at a practical illustration. Julian wafted through his training with no clear plan in mind. His trainees, Fred and Don, stared at him in disbelief. Neither had learned one single thing. Julian had failed and needed a different approach, but a new approach meant more work and Julian had no time for that. Fred suggested that he begin anew and look at things with a fresh set of eyes. Don tried reasoning and explained that his approach lacked clarity. Julian considered and acknowledged that his training wasn't quite cutting it, but that proper planning didn't suit his style. Fred and Don knew they had to save Julian from himself and forge a plan to help him out. Together, they formulated a plan that would rival military plans of attack and provided Julian with a life-altering training alternative.
I never teach my pupils. I only attempt to provide the conditions in which they can learn. Albert Einstein.
For many people, it is by doing that understanding comes. People come to training expecting to learn, and one of the best ways that you can help them to do that is to develop activities that support the learning objectives and allow for some kind of engaging action and development. Trainees expect that training will be stimulating, interesting, and yes, fun. That does not mean that you have to be a comedian, unless you are, of course, and are hosting a stand-up comics training workshop, but it does obligate you to incorporate some activities into your training that will engage your learners. Planned activities will bring the following elements to your training. Keeps the day moving at a stimulating pace. Fun helps to bring people together and break down barriers. Laughter leads to an endorphin release, which is healthy. Improve retention of material by providing hands-on application and practice. In order to fully involve your trainees, ensure you preface activities with a discussion about safety. Let them know that what takes place in training stays in training, so that they are encouraged to take risks, challenge previously held assumptions, and make mistakes and learn from them. Choosing the right activity is very important. One sign of a good trainer is someone who knows how to choose and even modify an activity to fit certain situations. A good resource library of activities is important so that you don't find yourself reusing the same activities and tiring of them, or exposing them to people over and over, especially if you are an in-house trainer developing workshops for the same people. The following list is a handy reference of the types of activities that can be the right fit for your training. Although some of the headings may overlap, the definitions are here to give you a better understanding of the range of activities that can be used. Game. A game is an exercise that normally has a set of rules and an element of competition. Games often include some kind of reward. Icebreakers. Icebreakers are used as an exercise to introduce group members to one another, break the ice, encourage some energy into the beginning of a workshop, and lead into the topic material. They are an important starting point to your training session. Energizer. An energizer is a brief pick-me-up activity designed to invigorate a group if energy in the room is waning, or to bring them back together following a break. Energizers are often about 5 minutes long. Simulations. A simulation is useful to train equipment operators when the tools that they will use are either very expensive or dangerous. Simulations are designed to be as realistic as possible so that participants can learn from the situation without worrying about damage or financial cost. Flying aircraft, offshore emergency evacuation procedures, combat training, and driving all make use of simulation training. Role plays. Role-playing is a helpful way to understand how participants react to certain situations. They are a very useful approach for practicing new skills in a non-threatening environment, where a participant learns to apply behavioral techniques and gets feedback without fear of making a mistake in front of their own customers or clients. Role-plays are helpful in learning conflict management, counseling, sales, negotiating, and many other skills. Case studies. Case studies are stories normally extracted from a participant's workplace or industry. They can also be written specifically to simulate a scenario. Case studies are often examined by individuals or groups and then analyzed to stimulate discussion or demonstrate aspects of training. When we think of emergencies, we often think about fire alarms going off, or someone getting ill, and are prepared for those things by knowing where emergency exits are, who to call, or how to respond. This section is for training emergencies, and how to prepare, avoid, and manage them. You've developed a brilliant course, all of your materials are ready, and the day is unfolding nicely when all of a sudden, things begin to go horribly wrong. What are you to do next? First of all, don't panic. Remaining calm in the face of an error or near disaster is important, because your participants will pick up on your emotions and get edgy just as fast as you do. If something is really wrong and you need help, make eye contact with the participant who has been particularly helpful and ask for their assistance. If you are faced with an emergency, for example, you as the trainer develop a horrible case of hives and must leave to take a dose of antihistamine and call a doctor, then having some activities on standby will help. A more likely scenario is running out of material if you have a group that is grasping their training very quickly. Preparing a standby pile of activities that reinforces the training objectives is ideal for this situation. When you develop training based on a model like the one below, most activities are designed to reinforce what your participants must learn first, followed by extensions for what they could learn, or that would be nice to know. These extension activities are also very useful when you have a training group that learns at varying speeds. You can offer the fast finishers some kind of reinforcement or enhancement to take that learning to a higher level, or simply offer more exposure to the content. Emergency activities do not have to be complicated. When you prepare your training, bring along some of the information, textbooks, policy, procedures, pertinent articles, photos, etc., that you use to develop your course, and allow participants to flip through the material. Ask them to provide you with feedback on what they read, create discussion questions, write a case study, or incorporate the enhancements into their action plans for the end of the day. Even if we create excellent courses and training plans, as trainers we recognize that a game or activity that work with one group may not work with another. In order to be comfortable that you have selected the best activities, consider the following. Avoid activities that would annoy you if you were a participant. Adjust the length and type of activity to suit the length of the training session. A one-day workshop may or may not benefit from a 45-minute icebreaker at the beginning. A 5 or 10-minute icebreaker is probably just fine. However, if your group is taking part in a 3 to 5-day workshop and the outcomes improve when participants get to know one another really well, then an extensive game of up to an hour is appropriate. Know your audience. Senior staff does not usually want to look silly or foolish in front of their subordinates. Junior staff may not be comfortable looking silly in front of their boss. If participants arrive in business clothes, they may not be comfortable with active games. If your session will be highly active or calls for casual clothes, make sure that participants know that ahead of time. Participants who work together may know each other very well and may find some exercises redundant. Be selective about the activities you choose. Learning that deals with personal development subjects such as communication or team building will benefit from games more so than training that is related to computer software, for example. The software group, however, might really need one or several short energizers throughout the day to maintain motivation and retention. If an activity flops, if an activity does not go over well with your group, don't push it through to the end just because it's a part of your lesson plan. Sometimes the dynamics of a group do not support an activity. Here are some things that you can do if an activity flops. Stop the activity and refocus the group. You can let them know that something went wrong, and that you are going to try again, or you can abandon it altogether and move on. Watch the energy levels. It is not unusual to expect that if an activity fizzles, the energy in the group will decrease sharply. People may feel that they have done something wrong. An energizer will get everyone reinvested in what is going on and restore those energy levels. Organize an on-the-spot debriefing session and have the trainees identify what went wrong and how to remedy the problem or move beyond it. Do not focus on why things went wrong, since that can lead to blaming or negativity that shouldn't be introduced to the session. Focus the conversation on what and how. If the activity was applicable to the learning objectives and would work with some modifications, then make some changes and use it again. If it really isn't applicable, then let it go and develop something that will enhance the training session the next time that it is offered. Now let's look at a practical illustration. Stacy's head spun as the training dragged on. The trainer failed to keep her trainees awake. A minute moved like molasses. Stacy felt herself age with each passing moment and her brain begged for mercy. The trainer hadn't done her homework and didn't have anything in her bag of tricks to keep her trainees engaged. Stacy had to take a stand before she collapsed in a ball and fell into a long winter's nap. Stacy declared the training officially over and asked the trainer to step aside and let her man the controls. Stacy stepped forward and took the helm. Stacy had a wealth of resources at her fingertips and dished them out a mile a minute. Soon, the whole training class erupted in applause. Stacy had saved them from their worst nightmare. The remaining hours whisked by and everyone left with more knowledge than when they arrived.
I have never let my schooling interfere with my education. Mark Twain.
Being ready is the sign of a competent trainer. Not being prepared can derail your training before it's even started. Follow the tips and techniques in this module to help you deliver effective and memorable training. When it comes to materials, being over-prepared is a good idea. As you design your lessons, you will also be creating a running materials list that you need to bring to training. Double-check the list and your supplies to make sure that you do not run out of a particular item, and that everything works as it should. There are few things more embarrassing for a trainer than to start training and realize that the key parts of an activity have been left at home, that the felt pens are all dried out, or the bulb in the projector needs replacing. What to do if you have forgotten something? Take it all in stride. Murphy's Law says, what can go wrong, will go wrong, and if you've ever had a day that went from bad to worse, you know that it can happen. You forget your handouts, or the bulb in the projector goes, or the laptop that has been provided won't read your memory stick. What to do? Have a backup plan. The longer you train, the more likely you are to come up with a related activity on short notice that will cover any serious problems, such as allowing for an IT technician to get your equipment up and running. This is where having extra material comes in handy. As trainers, we can exercise some caution when it comes to electronics and training. If your entire presentation relies on an electronic slide presentation such as PowerPoint and projector, then you will want to get in the habit of carrying an extra bulb with you at all times. It is also where your professionalism and ability to go with the flow are important. Don't let the absence of a video clip or a crashing computer derail the day. The more effort you can put into getting to know your potential training group, the more effectively you can design training that meets their needs. Use this space to list some different approaches to getting to know your audience. During training, or at the end with the evaluation form, you can gather information. Make sure the information you gather is protected in keeping with the appropriate privacy legislation. In addition, if you wish to send follow-up information, whether via email or post, you can ask participants for their contact information and their permission to contact them. Gathering this information is helpful for several reasons. It can allow you to send follow-up or additional information to the trainees, which will reinforce training, and you can also let people know when additional training that might interest them is available. As a professional practice, you should never, ever sell, lend, release, or otherwise compromise the lists of names and contact information that you gather as a part of your professional training. If you are trying to gather information about participants during training, perhaps to get a concrete idea of how much they know about a subject, you can design a pretest. At the beginning of training, or even a few days before, participants complete the pretest to create a benchmark of where they stand in terms of the training objectives. At the end of the day, they repeat the same or a very similar test, and then you will have a concrete demonstration of how much they have learned. An ideal classroom setup includes the following items. A room with minimum 10-foot ceilings and no pillars. Participants enter from the rear of the room to allow for the least amount of disruption. Tables are set up with fewer chairs than required, with extra chairs stacked in the back of the room. This ensures that people will fill the available tables and chairs, rather than having lots of tables available and people spread thinly throughout the room. To encourage discussion, tables need to be round, with people sitting around 2/3 of the table, and with the front 1/3 of the table empty, so that everyone can see the front of the room. 5 to 7 people per table is ideal for discussion purposes. Flip charts are only used for groups of fewer than 20. If you have more people than that, you should be writing on an overhead projector, large electronic whiteboard, or tablet projected onto a screen so that everyone can see. If you are using a projector, i.e., for PowerPoint slides, make sure you know how to adjust the keystone setting so that the image is square on the screen. The instruction book for your projector will explain how to do this. Any projection screen should be 40-inch or 44 off the floor at the bottom, so that everyone can see, hence the 10-foot ceilings. If you are using PowerPoint slides, make sure you are in slideshow mode, rather than application mode. This ensures that the slides take up maximum space and that toolbars and menus are hidden. Have a few tables against the walls of the room so that participants can flip through or gather materials as needed. One table at the front is helpful for the trainer to have access to their materials and to display items. Sometimes we are providing training in a room that is set and difficult to rearrange, i.e., in a university or a boardroom. Do the best you can with what you have, but enjoy the opportunities for ideal arrangements whenever you get them. Now let's look at a practical illustration. Carl fretted until his face turned blue. He didn't have a clue how to get the job done. A mountain of rough drafts climbed to the ceiling. Carl prepared to lose. An idea popped into his weary head. Soon, he had the foundation built, but he needed something more. Carl put one foot in front of the other and marched to the beat of a new drummer. Failure would not be an option, he thought to himself. Carl had turned into a new man, a new, confident leader, and stood tall, ready to face his nemesis, his arch-enemies, planning and preparation. They would quiver at the sight of him and know they didn't stand a chance. Carl had a solid plan and an indestructible courage that made others quake in their shoes. Carl took control and dominated the training arena.
Creative thinking may mean simply the realization that there's no particular virtue in doing things the way they have always been done. Rudolf Flesch.
Get the session started by welcoming people as they arrive. They are just as curious about you as you are about them. This initial greeting will serve as an icebreaker and help the participants ease into their day of training. Greetings are an important part of your training. When you think about greeting your participants, put yourself in their shoes and think of the things that appealed to you when you attended training sessions. Some key elements typically include the instructor greeting participants as they come through door, perhaps inviting each to sign in. The instructor asking participants to make themselves a name tag or tent card. Trainees introducing themselves individually. An icebreaker takes place. The trainer is introduced. The trainer and the room are prepared, ready, and welcoming. Agenda is reviewed. Participants are asked about their expectations and learning objectives. In order to be ready to welcome participants to your training, you must be prepared. Get a good night's sleep, and leave yourself plenty of time so that you arrive early at the training site. If your presentation is technology-heavy, arrive 45 to 60 minutes before your class starts in order to set up, test, and work out any problems before your participants arrive. If you are walking into training where the technology is already set up, or you are not using a laptop/presentation style approach, arrive 30 minutes early. Other things you will want to do. Set up your materials. Make sure the room is prepared properly. Locate the washrooms. Locate emergency exits. If your training runs for more than one day and everything is in working order, you can arrive 15 minutes early for day 2 onward, but be sure to calculate traffic and other factors, such as weather. It is important that you arrive before your participants do, and that you are ready and able to welcome them. To recap, your welcome should include the following. Ensure that the room is welcoming and ready. Greet participants individually as they arrive and invite them into the training room. Ask them to sign in and make themselves a name tag or tent card, if you are using them. Invite them to help themselves to a refreshment, if any are available. As you get things underway, introduce yourself, or have another trainer/host introduce you to break the ice and establish your credibility. Have the trainees introduce themselves. Review the agenda for the day so that people know what to expect. Ask participants about their expectations and personal learning objectives. When you ask participants about their expectations, be prepared for them to have thought of things that you may not have. If there are topics participants hope to cover, it is recommended that you do so to the best of your ability. If you are unable to incorporate these topics right away, assure the participants that you will provide them with information they need, and be sure to follow up. Perhaps incorporate a parking lot. Icebreakers can be used as an opener for training, and can serve multiple purposes. Openers help to prepare people for training. As a trainer, you are fully prepared for the day. Participants, however, can come from all kinds of places. They may be thinking about a project at work, worried about something at home, checking their phones for messages, or distracted by a myriad of things. In order to deliver effective training, we have to break through participants' barriers and tap into their motivation. Openers are important because they set the tone for learning, regain participants' attention, and redirect preoccupation. Many openers serve more than one purpose, and it is at the trainer's discretion to choose one that best serves the audience. For example, if you are training a group of people who know each other very well and work together every day, an introductory or networking icebreaker may not be very interesting for them. Focusing on team building, however, by having them complete a task together, would make more sense. People that do not know one another well can benefit from networking activities. The other important role of the icebreaker relates to tension. If there is tension in the room, it could interfere with retention. There are different types of tension that you should be aware of. Plan your material accordingly. Task tension can build when a learner is working on a completely new task or learning experience. Learning new software, rules, or policies can all contribute to task tension. Relationship tension can occur when a learner has been embarrassed previously in a classroom or is afraid of being singled out. Personal tension can occur when a learner is concerned about their workload building up while they are in training, is waiting for a phone call about, or is distracted by a personal matter. The right opening activity will assure learners that they are in a safe place where their learning needs will be met, and that they are respected contributors to the learning process. Energizers are exactly that. They are a short, often 5 to 10 minute activity that serves more than one purpose. An energizer can reconnect a group, for example, bring people back together after a coffee or lunch break. Inject some energy into the group if you notice that people are getting tired or are not concentrating. Break tension or provide some fun or humor. There are pre-written icebreakers and energizers included with this course. These are useful guides, and you can often modify the activities to suit your training needs. Now let's look at a practical illustration. Frank hemmed and hawed, he couldn't get it right. Frank needed the perfect greeting, but every effort fell flat. He needed a coach but didn't want to admit defeat. When his voice box called it quits and his large hands disappeared behind his fear, he gave up and cried out for help. Simon heard his battle cry and ran to assist. Frank acknowledged his shortcomings and begged for pointers. Simon jumped at the chance to carry the weight and help Frank over the bump. Simon mimed, acted, and role-played. Frank caught on quickly. Soon, Frank found a greeting and went into the training with just the perfect amount of bravado and humility. He succeeded and Simon stood proud as he watched.
The art of teaching is the art of assisting discovery. Mark Van Doren.
In instructor-led, participant-centered learning, we are always looking for ways for participants to experience success through a period of self-discovery. This does not mean that we never lecture. Sometimes, short lectures are the most effective way to deliver new content. What it does mean is that lecture is the last choice, after we have considered a variety or alternative methods. We form pictures in our mind as people speak to us, and we think much faster than we speak. Therefore, if someone speaks to me at an average rate of speed, 150 to 175 words per minute, and I am thinking at 400 to 500 words per minute, the right visual information will help me to form an accurate perception of the speaker's message. Earlier we mentioned that flip charts should be only used for groups of fewer than 20. We also mentioned that PowerPoint slides must use the Keystone template and be displayed properly in order to be effective. We have some additional key considerations when using videos as a visual aid. Videos can describe both technical and soft skills, how machinery works, or how best to deal with customer service scenarios. If you are using a video clip, choose it carefully, make sure that you have it cued to start at the right place. Preview the video clip. Make sure that you have the appropriate copyright permission. As you consider the video, ask yourself the following questions. Will your participants see this as relevant? Is the video directly applicable? Do you have to create supporting information, listening guides, activities, to go with the video? A video is not used as a change of pace or different media. It must apply directly to the training. Whiteboards, having replaced old-fashioned chalkboards almost exclusively, whiteboards can be a useful tool in training. Markers come in a wide variety of saturated colors, which are very effective and can be seen throughout a small to medium-sized training room. If you are not familiar with writing on a whiteboard, make sure that you get some practice. The surface of a whiteboard is quite different than chalkboards or flip charts, and it can take a few tries before you are able to write in reasonably legible letters, on a fairly straight line. Whiteboards are often magnetized. If your training includes concepts that build one upon the other or relate to one another, you can print the concepts on very large cards and attach them to magnetic strips. That way you can move them easily on the magnetic board and demonstrate how things relate to one another, work on sequencing items, or on developing new processes. Flip charts are a great tool, but often misunderstood. The idea of a flip chart is that you have a visual tool that you can create on the go during training, or ahead of time for short lists. The flip chart is suitable for groups of fewer than 20. People at the back of the room will have difficulty reading a flip chart. To effectively use a flip chart, prepare some sheets in advance if possible and keep them covered with a few blank sheets until you need them. You can also cover points with blank strips of paper that you tape on if the paper is not self-adhesive, and then remove carefully through your presentation. Use highly saturated color, but don't feel like you have to stick to black, blue, and red. You can now get felt markers in dark green, purple, bright pink, orange, and many other colors. As long as the color is saturated, very dark, people should be able to read them. Avoid yellows, pastels, or washed out colors. Leave some empty space at the bottom of the page so that you can add things later, or, if you are sticking the pages to a wall for people to refer to, so that participants across the room can still read what is at the bottom. Make your flip chart pages look interesting. Underline, circle, or put stars around key concepts using a variety of color and shapes. Delivery tips: when you are using a whiteboard, flip chart, or slides, here are some tips for engaging your learners. Don't stand with your back to the group and read from the chart. Stand to one side, facing trainees, and refer to the information. If you stand in front of the chart, they cannot see what is on it, and if you are not facing them, they may not hear what you have to say. Touch the information as you refer to it, or use a movable device, a laser pointer, to point it out. Tear off the flip chart when you finish the page, then hang it on the wall to demonstrate its value and as an ongoing visual reminder of what has been discussed. Don't just flip it over the back where it moves off of people's minds. Using PowerPoint effectively, it may be tempting to turn everything you want to say into an electronic slide, but variety in presentation will create a more interesting training session. The most common version used in training at present is PowerPoint, but there are other similar programs. Prezi and Canva are just two of a multitude of options. When you create slides, remember that they are simply a visual aid and a tool. Don't feel that you need to capture every word you say, or want the trainees to learn on a slide. Some of the most powerful slides you can create will have little or no text on them, yet will be enhanced with photos and other graphics related to the training. Tips for supporting materials: whatever visual aid you are considering, here are some questions to help you determine its effectiveness. Space: is the visual clear and obvious about what you are communicating? Does it make good use of space? Sight: can people see the information clearly? Are the colors dark enough, and print size large enough, that no one is squinting? Singular: does the visual represent a single, important idea? If not, you may confuse your trainees by squeezing too much into one visual. Significant: does it focus trainees' attention on the point you are trying to make? Simple: desktop publishing and access to different fonts can be lots of fun, but if you have too many typefaces, images, or graphics on one visual, people can miss the point. Keep things simple. One good guideline is that there should be no more than 2 different fonts on a slide, and no more than one idea. With a little practice, you will be able to gauge when your group needs a break from training. If you have set up an agenda that includes breaks, people will expect you to release them on time, so be sure to stick to what you have said. With some experience, you will be able to sense other times when people may start to fade. If people are getting sleepy, a significant danger in the post-lunch period when serotonin levels naturally fall and people are sometimes tempted to nap, introduce a quick stretch break or short energizer. Another technique is to ensure that there is plenty of cold water available in the room so that people feel well hydrated. We expect participants will make it back from breaks on time and with enthusiasm. That's not always the case, however, and some pre-planning on your part will help participants stay on track and return on time. Music. Question and answer or trivia game. Have a volunteer bring people back in. Blink the lights off and on. Offer a great tip or two just as the break ends. Synchronize watches/phones at the first break and then use odd times to bring them back, like 10:17. Ask participants to set an alarm on their watch/phone. Now let's look at a practical illustration. Jill and Nate put a lot of thought into their training presentation. They each had some creative ideas to implement. After a brief brainstorming session and a sensible conversation about how much material they would actually need to create a great workshop, they cut out materials that weren't as necessary to the success of the workshop. They were proud of their compilation and anxious to present it. Their training session was a success. The participants gave rave reviews. Jill and Nate were glad they realized that less really is more when it comes to information, and when it's well organized and better presented, there is no room for frustration or failure.
The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new lands, but in seeing with new eyes. Marcel Proust.
Participant-centered training is led by a trainer, but sometimes you may wonder why you are there because things are going so well. This is a sign of excellent program design, and that participants are taking responsibility for their learning. Give yourself credit for setting up an excellent workshop, since the learning that is going on actually wouldn't be taking place without you. This module will discuss ways to create one of those energetic, interactive workshops. In order to engage participants through discussion, it is helpful for you to keep the terms instructor-led, participant-directed in mind. Placing parameters around the discussion helps participants stay on track and meet the objectives. If you just have them discuss a topic, it can be easy for one or two people to take over the conversation, or for someone to take off on a tangent. Some good tips to help participants stay on track include: provide participants with the objectives of the discussion. Example, identify 3 to 5 ways that discussion is helpful in training, or a set of statements or questions that will guide them. Organize groups in different ways so that trainees interact with a variety of people. When presenting questions to a large group, the trainer should ask the entire group and then select the person who will answer it. Sometimes we select the person first and then ask the question, but there is a good chance the rest of the group will tune out once they know they do not have to provide an answer. Provide people with processing and thinking time. Some people want to answer right away, and others prefer to think about an answer before expressing it. One way to do this is to give participants time to write notes or answer questions on paper before they start to discuss the topic. This gives people who prefer time to reflect more of an opportunity to join a discussion. Respect everyone's answers and thank them for them. This will encourage people to join the discussion. In order to make group activities work for you as a trainer, here are some tips. Provide the group with clear directions, points to discuss, or case studies to keep them focused. Make sure you have all the materials required for group work to start on time and be most effective. Circulate around the room, keeping groups on track and offering assistance or refocusing when needed. Sticky notes don't just add color to your presentation, they can also add value as a visual aid. A few ideas for using sticky notes in a presentation. Write just one idea per note. Write only 1 or 2 words per note. If you are using sticky notes at the front of a room, make sure you use saturated color markers and write in the same size letters you use on your flip chart or whiteboard. Place smaller sticky notes on participant tables so that they can use them to highlight memorable information throughout your workshop or use them as a bookmark. Now let's look at a practical illustration. Kim stopped Lori in the hallway and asked why she needed all the supplies. Lori explained that trainees deserved to be heard and the supplies would give them a voice. Kim stood dumbstruck. She'd never heard such a thing. Lori took her by the hand and led her to the conference room, lined with sticky notes of every color in the rainbow and pens and pencils galore. Kim had never seen so many bright, vibrant colors in one place. Lori delighted in the sight and greeted her guests by name. Kim watched in awe. Lori let each participant speak their mind and jot down their ideas. Kim dubbed Lori the queen of training with an open mind and ready ears.
It's always helpful to learn from your mistakes, because then your mistakes are worthwhile. Gary Marshall.
People are motivated to attend training sessions for various reasons. Prepare for behaviors that can derail your training plan so that you can continue to deliver effective training. Practically anyone can have an off day and be considered difficult, even trainers. Frustration, boredom, or personality characteristics can offer challenges that you may not be anticipating. Rules will help to establish the learning environment. Asking participants to create some rules will be an effective tool during workshops about team building and trust. Rules that are suggested by participants will often relate to respect for one another. In the interest of time, the rules can also be stated by the trainer. Try to keep the list of rules brief and direct, and post them in the room as a reminder to the participants. The 3 key rules are: respect, arriving on time, avoiding sidebar conversation, turning cell phones off, or at least to vibrate. Encouraging participation and fun, remind participants that regardless their motivation for attending today's training, everyone will be treated with the same respect and courtesy. Each will be awarded the freedom to explore and try out new ideas without feeling judged or bullied. What takes place in the workshop stays in the workshop. Comments about the workplace or a particular person, or how funny someone might have been in the workshop, are not spread through the workplace as gossip following the session. Understanding this will encourage participants to take risks during the training. This rule is often very helpful for the trainer in terms of rapport, participation, and respect. However, if the employer, who is paying for training, expects the trainer to report back to them what learning has taken place and so on, be sure that the trainees are aware of this. Depending on the nature of the training, you may be able to maintain a staying in the workshop approach and report just the training outcomes to the employer. Rules can have a fun aspect to them if you word them with a little creativity. For example, rule number 3 can be reworded with the well-known phrase, "What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas." Rules will help to establish the learning environment. Asking participants to create some rules will be an effective tool during workshops about team building and trust. Rules that are suggested by participants will often relate to respect for one another. In the interest of time, the rules can also be stated by the trainer. Try to keep the list of rules brief and direct, and post them in the room as a reminder to the participants. The 3 key rules are: respect, arriving on time, avoiding sidebar conversation, turning cell phones off, or at least to vibrate. Encouraging participation and fun, remind participants that regardless their motivation for attending today's training, everyone will be treated with the same respect and courtesy. Each will be awarded the freedom to explore and try out new ideas without feeling judged or bullied. What takes place in the workshop stays in the workshop. Comments about the workplace or a particular person, or how funny someone might have been in the workshop, are not spread through the workplace as gossip following the session. Understanding this will encourage participants to take risks during the training. This rule is often very helpful for the trainer in terms of rapport, participation, and respect. However, if the employer, who is paying for training, expects the trainer to report back to them what learning has taken place and so on, be sure that the trainees are aware of this. Depending on the nature of the training, you may be able to maintain a staying in the workshop approach and report just the training outcomes to the employer. Rules can have a fun aspect to them if you word them with a little creativity. For example, rule number 3 can be reworded with the well-known phrase, "What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas." Most often, your training is going to look easy to participants. That is part of doing a great job. Sometimes, though, things can happen that will set your training schedule sideways. In order to be prepared for interruptions, you and your group will develop some strategies to manage them effectively. The next time that something goes awry, what will you do? Now let's look at a practical illustration. Charlie couldn't hear himself think over all the chatter. He had lost control of the training session. Participants shouted and hollered like a bunch of schoolyard children. Charlie whistled. The noise continued. Charlie begged, no one heard him. Charlie stood high atop a chair to ask for the commotion to stop. No one flinched. Charlie wiped his brow and whispered under his breath for the participants to cut out the noise. Soon, the room hushed and all eyes fell on him. Charlie had finally made progress and knew he had to do something before chaos once again erupted. He thought for a moment and announced that this untoward behavior had to stop. The participants understood immediately that Charlie had regained control and they remained seated, listening respectfully as he continued.
No matter how thoroughly a person learned the Greek alphabet, he will never be in a condition to repeat it backwards without further training. Hermann Ebbinghaus.
Some elements of training are difficult, but you'll get through them because you are a professional. You may be asked to facilitate a subject that is very sensitive, or you could find yourself partway through a presentation and learn that you have struck a nerve and will need to adjust your material. Imagine that you have just been asked to provide health and safety training for your organization. You have never facilitated this training and know little about it. However, there was a serious injury at the workplace 2 weeks ago that left one worker dead and another seriously injured. The difficulty is not just that someone died on the worksite, but that you know all of the people involved. What can you do to identify these difficult situations before training and be prepared for them? Sometimes, the unexpected can arise in what would be considered an otherwise harmless training session. As we mentioned in an earlier module, people can often be preoccupied with unfinished tasks at work, family pressures, and many other things. If you are treading close to emotional issues, it is possible that you will strike a nerve with someone. Sometimes you will be addressing sensitive issues in training that could trigger an emotional reaction. The greatest tools for adjusting your materials are revealed prior to the actual training. If you have been able to do some pre-training survey work, or have interviewed a supervisor, you may be able to uncover issues that could arise, and will be better equipped for what may follow. If you do not have the luxury of pre-training interviews, then your flexibility at managing a classroom, dealing with change, offering support, and creating a safe learning environment will all contribute to the success of this training endeavor. One way to deal with sensitive issues is to provide an attitude survey before a tough topic is discussed. This allows participants to put their thoughts and reactions on paper and provides them with some thinking and adjusting time before the topic is discussed aloud among the group or before other activities get underway. Here are some tips for using an attitude survey in your training. It does not have to be called an attitude survey. Title it as something that makes sense and fits with your training plan. The term attitude survey is here for you to see, but might seem intimidating for participants depending on the subject. Participants may not want to reveal their answers to one another. Watch closely to ensure that people are not intruding on one another by forcing someone to reveal their thoughts. The attitude survey can be a good pre- and post-training activity. Participants can use the tool to monitor their own thinking or shift in perception throughout the training process. It may seem straightforward to offer an attitude survey, but you need to consider the language you use. Make sure statements are not open to interpretation or bias, by using clear and simple language. It also helps in the program design stage to have a colleague review the questions or statements with you so that you can prepare an effective survey. Now let's look at a practical illustration. Clyde held his head in his hands. The workshop worried him. Clyde had never known such dizziness and knew the reason behind it. He wasn't comfortable with the subject matter he was asked to present, and didn't know how to broach it sensitively. He knew he needed help. Clyde called his coworker, Ronald, and asked for his assistance. Ronald jumped at the chance to walk him through it, as he had once offered similar training and was sure he could offer Clyde some tips and tricks to get the training done effectively. Clyde rehearsed the material until he memorized every last letter and could say it in his sleep. When the workshop day arrived, Clyde woke up with a newfound confidence and a plan in place and gave the best lecture of his life. Although this workshop is coming to a close, we hope that your journey to improve your skills as a trainer is just beginning. We wish you the best of luck on the rest of your travels. Excellence is an art won by training and habituation. We do not act rightly because we have virtue or excellence, but we rather have those because we have acted rightly. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act but a habit. Aristotle. The beautiful thing about learning is that no one can take it away from you. B.B. King. Recently I was asked if I was going to fire an employee who made a mistake that cost $600,000. No, I replied, I just spent $600,000 training him. Thomas J. Watson.